Middle East one first.
Okay, he's just saying that.
Yeah.
You mean stay?
How are you?
Good.
You all right?
All right, let's let the Subcommittee of Oversight and Accountability come to order. The purpose of this hearing is to examine the foreign assistance grants process within the Department of State's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, and the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, and the Office of International Religious Freedom. And I'm now going to recognize myself for an opening statement, and then I'm going to recognize Ranking Member Crow for an opening statement, and then we'll introduce you all, and would love to hear from you all each for about 5 minutes as well. So this is our second hearing on foreign assistance grants, fittingly titled Money is Policy, and that is the reality money talks and it shapes our foreign policy. When we send foreign aid abroad, number one, it all comes from the American taxpayer. Number two, it's usually not Uncle Sam doing the heavy lifting. We're outsourcing that job to external organizations, trusting them to get the mission done in line with America's foreign policy goals and objectives. At least that's what we're led to believe, and that's what we hope happens in many circumstances. But something starkly different happens when that theory is put into practice in too many cases. When the State Department cuts a check to an NGO abroad, whether it is Humanist International or the Red Cross or some other group, what those entities then do on the ground effectively becomes U.S. policy paid for by the U.S. taxpayer. They're meant to be implementing U.S. taxpayer policy with the dollars that are given to them by State Department. Today, We're going to look at both good and bad grants. Unfortunately, because of the way these grants are structured, it seems that in many cases, from my observation, State Department may not have a clue what its implementing partners are doing. Or State Department doesn't care what its partners are pushing in terms of ideological agendas abroad that a large portion of the American people would not be supportive, or our Constitution. Or the State Department knows what's happening and may be ignoring what's happening because they actually support it even though they may know it's wrong. All three of those are problematic situations if any of them are occurring. Let's kick things off with something that I've spoke about in length. Atheism grant in Nepal. For years, the State Department has swore up and down that Humanist International was not promoting atheist networks, expanding atheism, or promoting atheism in Nepal. This has gone on for years with a back and forth between this committee and the State Department. Deputy Secretary of State for Management and Resources, Richard Verma, came here to this subcommittee, forcefully declared without hesitation, State Department was not funding the promotion of atheism in Nepal. But just a month later, that office called me personally to reverse course, and in my opinion, they realized that the ruse was up, that they weren't going to get away with the lies that were being told to us any further. So they had to start digging themselves out of this hole, and they discovered that Humanist International had not actually been straightforward with them. That raises a whole mess of new questions that have yet to be answered properly, and I will have more to say about that later. Another issue uncovered by this committee's majority concerns illegal immigration policies in places like Mexico. One grant, for instance, went to a group that literally violated the terms of its grant agreement by coaching migrants on how to evade U.S. law. Let me say this in a more plain way. Under border czar Kamala Harris, the Biden-Harris administration gave out grants to coach illegals on how to evade U.S. law, on how to get around Border Patrol so they could come here and have their lodging, food, health care, other things paid for by the American taxpayer. That is real. That's something that happened under this administration. In that circumstance, the State Department tried to stonewall this committee about this grant as well, just like they did with the Atheism in Nepal grant. First, the State Department denied that there was any cause for concern. Then they dug in a little bit more. The State Department backtracked and admitted there was a problem at a certain point. The State Department did not just provide inaccurate information to this committee. The State Department lied to us. And let's remember that these are public hearings. And they're public hearings in the people's house, which means that if you're lying to us, you are lying to the American people from whom you actually get every single dollar which you may spread around the globe. These people work for you. So I'm going to go back to what I said earlier again. Is the State Department going to claim at some point that they did not know what was being done? Is the State Department going to say that they didn't care what was being done? Or is the State Department going to tell us that they knew about it, they knew it was wrong, but they encouraged it to go on anyways because people in State Department were in support of these radical ideas? No matter which way it goes, it's unacceptable. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I would say this, I believe this personally, if we have a diplomat abroad or a dollar of foreign aid going anywhere or a kernel of aid somewhere, it should be to make America win. What we have instead is in too many cases the State Department fighting to make the world godless, which is what grants to expand atheism do, or coaching migrants on how to enter our southern border illegally, evading U.S. law. Let me switch gears for 1 second here in the negative time I have remaining because I've already gone over. The Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, also known as JTIP. JTIP seems to be doing a damn good job of picking solid projects and following up on them, in my opinion. We've examined this office as well. Their work, which targets child trafficking and scam centers, has been a success. They have been transparent throughout with this committee. I look forward to hearing more about the success on how JTIP is performing its due diligence to monitor and evaluate the outcomes of the programs that they put in place. And I hope that other parts of State Department can learn lessons both in how to communicate with this committee, these subcommittees, and how to conduct proper oversight of the programs that they are implementing. And with that, I will recognize Ranking Member Crow for any opening remarks that he may have.
Thank you, Chairman Mast. I'm going to start by thanking our witnesses for being here today and for your dedicated public service on behalf of the American people. On this subcommittee, we have a unique opportunity to explore a variety of disparate topics within the jurisdiction of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And we play a unique role in publicly laying out what is working properly as we work to advance our diplomatic and development objectives and what is not. That is always legitimate oversight. That, in my opinion, is our job, and that is productive oversight. The topic of today's hearing is one that has the potential to fit into that category. It is a chance to have a productive conversation on how to improve the U.S. foreign assistance process and highlight for the American people what robust foreign assistance means for our interests in an area of widespread instability and renewed great power competition. It is a chance to talk about what is working, what is not, and to dispel misinformation about what foreign assistance is and what it is not. When we held a hearing on this topic in June with a private panel, we had what I believe was at times a helpful and productive conversation. We heard legitimate suggestions about how to make our foreign assistance more transparent, and we heard about how such assistance advances our national interest. But we also heard unsubstantiated claims of widespread mismanagement and minimal oversight in the misguided narrative that our assistance goes to promoting particular ideologies or belief systems over others. So I want to begin today in similar fashion that I did at the opening of our committee hearing in June by reiterating a few key facts and expressing my hopes for today's hearing. Key fact number one, our foreign assistance programs go through a rigorous process to justify their creation, followed by competitive bidding to find the best implementers for the job. And then they undergo ongoing monitoring and mechanisms to recoup American investment should any kind of waste, fraud, or abuse occur. Key fact two, while U.S. foreign assistance programs do advance our values and interests, many of which have been made explicit by Congress, they do not, by law, push domestic political agendas that favor one belief system or one political party over another. Multiple witnesses have testified to our committee that the department and its partners clearly understand and take seriously these obligations. They proactively train and take other steps to preempt any violations of the Establishment Clause of the Constitution or any other elements of U.S. law. Key fact three, U.S. foreign assistance helps us advance human rights, reduce instability caused by a lack of basic necessities, and create environments that are permissive for U.S. engagement and economic growth. It demonstrates that when there are global challenges to democracy, to human rights, or to the humanitarian needs of people around the world, that the U.S., not our adversaries, takes the lead. So that leads me to my goal for this hearing, that we can discuss with the officials responsible for overseeing these programs in their respective bureaus and offices how we can do all these things better, how we can be more transparent, how we can be more efficient, how we can be more effective. That is legitimate oversight. I think we can have that discussion, and hopefully we can keep it on the rails. But I also want to be really clear that these claims of lying and misleading, there is simply no evidence to support that. The department has repeatedly come to us in good faith, time and time again. There have been corrections that have been made. There have been additional follow-ups. There's been additional oversight. That is the natural process. But at no time has there been bad faith or lying or misleading, and I will correct the record whenever those assertions are made. So with that, I appreciate the witnesses for coming in, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Crow. Pleased to have you all as witnesses today on this and a number of important topics. First of all, we're going to have the Honorable Valls-Noyes. Thank you for being here today. She is the Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. Next is the Honorable Dyer. She is the Ambassador at Large for the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons. And last we have the Honorable Hussein, who is the Ambassador at Large for the Office of International Religious Freedom. Thank you for being here today. Your full statement will be made a part of the record. I'll ask you to keep your spoken remarks to 5 minutes in order to allow time for members to ask their questions. And I now recognize Assistant Secretary Valls-Noyes.
Good morning, Chair Mast, Ranking Member Crow, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here today to talk with you about how the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, or PRM, implements the Department of State's grants and award management process. PRM is responsible for leading U.S. humanitarian diplomacy. We are the steward of policies and programs that sustain humanitarian responses to unprecedented levels of forced displacement globally. This includes assistance for refugees, stateless persons, conflict victims, and the most vulnerable migrants. We also manage the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. As the title of this hearing is Money is Policy, I would like to note at the outset that PRM prioritizes our funding decisions strategically. Then we carefully monitor our programs worldwide to ensure that they meet our policy objectives. We use a variety of tools, including traveling, to evaluate the effectiveness of crisis responses firsthand. As the PRM Assistant Secretary, I personally take part in these monitoring trips, and it is an honor to see in person how humanitarian assistance so generously provided by the Congress and the American taxpayer is saving lives around the world. In March, for example, I traveled to Ethiopia and Chad to witness the response to the Sudan displacement crisis, the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. There, PRM is providing critical life-saving assistance, including food, water, sanitation facilities, shelter, medical services, and protection to Sudanese fleeing the conflict. I spoke to refugees who shared stories of their harrowing journeys to Chad, fleeing unspeakable horrors in Darfur. Women and children arrive at the UN Refugee Agency site on Chad's border with literally nothing but the clothes on their backs. The human toll is unimaginable. I also meet regularly with the donor community and with humanitarian actors to coordinate our work. We constantly seek new approaches to address growing gaps between the dire needs and humanitarian responses. As authorized by the Migration and Refugee Assistance Act, PRM administers and monitors U.S. contributions to international organizations and funds cooperative agreements with non-governmental organizations, or NGOs. PRM also coordinates closely with USAID on assistance to displaced populations, addressing issues related to food security, integration, and other programming. To implement our NGO programs globally, PRM openly competes assistance award opportunities through publicly advertised notices in accordance with federal regulations and Department of State policy. My written testimony provides further details, but I'll give you a high-level summary of the process. First, we conduct a technical review to determine partners' eligibility. Next, a merit review panel evaluates their submissions. PRM conducts due diligence, including a risk assessment, and then we create a plan to monitor any risks identified. Once these processes are complete, I review and approve as Assistant Secretary PRM awards. And it is important to note that the majority of PRM funding to NGOs is awarded through cooperative agreements. Such agreements enable greater programmatic oversight and more active collaboration with our partners to implement their projects. Monitoring is, of course, mandatory for all department assistance awards. As part of PRM's comprehensive monitoring and evaluation activities, PRM program and grants officers and our teams based in the field conduct site visits and monitoring meetings. Let me give you some examples of what this looks like in practice in our hemisphere. PRM's humanitarian coordinators based in Mexico make monitoring trips to examine the work of our partners in person and to assess program performance at least twice a month. In addition, as of the end of August, PRM staff based in DC had made 5 monitoring trips to Mexico this year. During fiscal year 2023, our Ecuador-based team conducted 32 monitoring trips to the 8 countries that they cover in South America. On their recent trip to Brazil, refugee coordinators traveled to 5 cities to visit each PRM partner and to meet with local government and military officials. In addition to our own field monitoring, PRM supports and accompanies members of Congress, and staff delegations conducting congressional oversight efforts on their trips. So in closing, I would like to emphasize my personal commitment and that of PRM to ask as responsible stewards of migration and refugee assistance resources generously provided by Congress. This is critical to show American taxpayers that their hard-earned tax dollars effectively meet the humanitarian needs of millions of people around the world affected by conflict, displacement, and statelessness. And as the daughter of refugees myself, this is my way of paying forward what this generous, great country did for my family. I thank the members of this subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss PRM's life-saving work done through our grants and other awards, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now recognize the Honorable Dyer for her opening statement.
Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Crow, and distinguished members of this subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the work of the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, or the TIP Office. Before discussing our international programs, I want to take a step back to explain the broader work of our office and how that work guides our grants portfolio. One of the core mandates of our office is producing the annual Trafficking in Persons Report, or TIP report, which assesses the anti-trafficking efforts of 188 countries and territories. The TIP report also serves to highlight how human trafficking is linked to broader national security challenges, from state-sponsored forced labor in the People's Republic of China, Cuba, and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea to online scam operations that have defrauded Americans out of billions of dollars. The TIP report is central to our grant making. Our international programs are directly linked to recommendations in the report, which focus on the 3 Ps of anti-trafficking: prosecuting traffickers, protecting victims, and preventing this crime. And these 3 Ps are made possible with a 4th P of partnership. Our annual foreign assistance appropriation of nearly $76 million is divided into 3 primary programming streams. The first is our Child Protection Compact, CPC, Partnerships Program, to which Congress has appropriated $12.5 million. These are multi-year bilateral partnerships with other governments to combat child sex trafficking and forced child labor. We have successfully concluded CPCs in Ghana, the Philippines, and Jamaica, and have 4 currently underway in Peru, Colombia, Mongolia, and Cote d'Ivoire. And we just launched our newest CPC with Romania earlier this week. The second stream is our bilateral and regional program portfolio, which represents $38.5 million. These are multi-year projects in specific countries or regions. The final stream is our Program to End Modern Slavery, or PIMS program, to which Congress has allocated $25 million. This program helps understand trafficking challenges through cutting-edge research, which is then used to target programming, making it more efficient and effective. All of our programs are selected through a rigorous review process and in full accordance with relevant procurement regulations and processes. And we notify Congress before obligating funds for all of our grants, and regularly brief authorizing and appropriations committee staff on ongoing or upcoming programs. Each year, we issue about 37 new awards. We currently have 118 active awards, all of which are listed on our public website. Nearly 3/4 of our implementing partners are nonprofit organizations. The rest of our implementing partners are international organizations, including the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and the International Labor Organization. We seek to always be responsible stewards of taxpayer funds, and of course we want our programs to be as successful as possible. After a project is awarded, we work closely with the implementing partner to ensure it stays on track based on established performance indicators. Our program officers regularly conduct site visits. Our office also requires implementers to fund an external evaluation of their own project. As a result, we have a very strong track record. We take our fiduciary responsibility to the American people extremely seriously, and we want to ensure every single dollar we spend has the greatest impact possible to protect victims, prosecute traffickers, and prevent this abhorrent crime. I'm incredibly proud of the work our office does to combat human trafficking and protect vulnerable children, women, and men around the world from exploitation and abuse, and to advance American interests and values. And I am grateful for Congress's strong bipartisan focus on this issue and support for our work. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I now recognize the Honorable Hussein for his opening statement.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Mast, Ranking Member Crow, Representative Issa, Representative Dean, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I've had the honor to serve as U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom since 2022, continuing our country's proud tradition of working on a bipartisan basis to protect religious freedom for everyone, everywhere. During my prior time in government, I led an effort to protect Christians and other religious minorities living in Muslim-majority countries, resulting in the landmark Marrakesh Declaration in 2016. This work followed our efforts on an important effort to counter blasphemy laws that are often used to target religious minorities. I've also worked closely with past U.S. envoys and current U.S. Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff on countering anti-Semitism around the world, including by taking delegations of imams to the Holocaust sites to combat Holocaust denial. I am proud that these efforts were recognized in the endorsements of a number of individuals and groups, including my predecessor, Sam Brownback, my predecessor, David Saperstein, the American Jewish Committee, the Anti-Defamation League, Christian Solidarity Worldwide, American Baptist Churches, Open Doors USA, and the President of the National Council of Churches. We continue to work on a bipartisan basis with these individuals and organizations and others, including In Defense of Christians, where I'll be delivering remarks at their annual reception tonight. The Office of International Religious Freedom's mandate was established by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, which passed by an overwhelming bipartisan majority, and our policies and general processes have remained consistent across the past 5 administrations. The thrust of our work falls into 3 broad categories: exposing, countering, and preventing religious freedom violations. First, our work to expose religious freedom violations is focused on our international report that documents religious freedom violations in every country in the world. These reports are read by governments and civil society around the world. In April, in an indictment of 2 individuals for opening and operating a illegal overseas police station used to target Falun Gong practitioners and other members of the Chinese community on U.S. soil, the DOJ specifically cited the 2021 International Religious Freedom China report, noting that the Chinese Communist Party maintains an extra-legal party-run security apparatus to eliminate the Falun Gong movement. Second, our work to counter religious freedom violations is focused on using our diplomatic and program tools to assist people who have been or are at risk of being persecuted for their beliefs. And third, efforts to prevent persecution focus on addressing the abusive laws, such as blasphemy laws, and policies that foster environments where discrimination, harassment, and violence take place. We work on individual cases of repression, and we're never off the clock, often getting notified in the late hours of the night of individuals who have been arrested or wrongly detained, and realizing that every minute that we wait to jump into action can cost someone his or her life. We do this work whenever and wherever it is needed. Last year, we worked extensively with the Shenzhen Holy Reformed Church, or the Mayflower Church, to protect its members' right to freedom of religion or belief in the face of relentless pressure from the Chinese Communist Party, even after they fled China. On April 7th, I was thrilled to welcome members of this church to the United States, where they celebrated Easter at a Texas church in safety. Most recently, my office supported the long-negotiated September 5 Nicaraguan political prisoner release. The 135 political prisoners included approximately 60 survivors of religious persecution, including 13 individuals from this group who are affiliated with the Texas evangelical organization Mountain Gateway. And we continue other substantial efforts to protect people of all faiths in places such as Burma, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Nigeria, and Saudi Arabia. In recent years, our programs have focused on countering discrimination and abuses targeting members of faith communities around the world, including religious persecution in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America. We have worked closely with other offices across the department to address the dangerous rise in anti-Semitism, to counter genocides and crimes against humanity impacting members of religious minority communities, including the Yazidis, Christians, Rohingya, and Uyghurs, and to combat hatred directed at particular religious communities. Additionally, our programming supports activities such as documenting abuses against members of vulnerable communities, promoting greater mutual respect and tolerance for all in society, promoting accountability for perpetrators and justice for victims of religious freedom abuses, providing legal assistance and other tangible support to individuals who have been tortured, arrested, or detained on account of their beliefs. In light of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, the State Department does not fund any programs with the aim of promoting or advancing specific religious ideologies or beliefs. Religious freedom programs provide tools to support those facing persecution, abuse, harassment, discrimination, and violence on account of their religion, belief, or non-beliefs. Earth's single largest program by far is a Global Emergency Fund, which began in 2011. And since 2020, this fund has helped more than 4,000 individuals in every region of the world and across every religious background escape abuse, harassment, jail, and even death on account of their beliefs. I thank the members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to discuss this critical work.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. We're now going to recognize members for about 5 minutes to ask questions, and we hope to have honest and prompt responses from you all. I'm going to begin by yielding time to Representative Issa to begin the questioning, and then we'll go side by side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, you've had a distinguished career, your career, foreign service, but your department is responsible for giving us knowingly false information, and I want to just go over it quickly. As the committee did its oversight over the PRM's assistance, we were told, and I'd ask that she be given copies of this, and I'll ask that it all be placed in the record. And I'll quote, this was in January of 2023, and again in December of 2023. Legal assistance, PRM, has not funded and does not fund legal representation or counseling related to immigration proceedings. Again, later in December, from the government of Mexico, PRM does not fund legal representation or counseling related to U.S. immigration proceedings, and legal assistance provided to those in Mexico is solely for the Mexican legal processes. At this moment, under, make sure I say it right, under the rules of Title 18, or US 18, Title 1001, is that a true statement, either of those?
Congressman, PRM funds,
Ma'am, that's a yes or no, it really is. Are those true statements?
yes.
Okay, then if you'd please give her a copy of this. Are you aware of this packet that was used throughout 2023?
Yes.
Does it limit to legal activities in Mexico, or does it on pages 9, 10, and 11 clearly advise people on how to get asylum in the U.S.?
This packet of information, Congressman, was not funded by PRM. It was funded by the UN Refugee
Was this
Agency.
organization at this time under funding from the United States?
The organization was, this packet was not produced
Okay,
with
so
U.S. funding.
one of the problems with the title I mentioned to you is that it makes it a crime to use tricks or mislead. Were you aware of this activity under other funds while you were funding this organization?
Congressman, this slide deck and these briefings were begun before I was confirmed as Assistant Secretary.
Ma'am, they were going on during these days of those statements. Right in the middle of it, the packet says May of 2023 was the revision. I'm going to go back to the original question because I think it's the most important question for you today as a Senate confirmed officer. Were you aware of this packet?
I became aware of the packet when we were producing documents for the Congress in response to their requests. I had not seen it before
What
then.
disciplinary actions or other activities do you envision when Congress has been told something in writing that is untrue, and then you discover this?
Congressman, again, I repeat, this packet was not funded by PRM. We became aware of it when the...
Ma'am, I'm going to make something very clear to you. The intent of Congress is not to use the fungibility of money to give an organization that goes out with the people that you are funding, and those people and that organization do something inconsistent with what you tell Congress and what your mandate is. Money's fungible. As long as you give to this organization, which I understand you're still funding around the world, and they have a dual purpose, and they use that dual purpose to do something that Congress clearly doesn't want. Nowhere in this deck, we'll call it UN funded for a moment just to humor you, nowhere in this deck does it suggest that you can seek refuge in Mexico, which under international law, you have not only a right to, but an obligation to. Isn't it true under international law that every refugee in Mexico, if they're not Mexican, is by definition eligible to seek refuge there, and Mexico is at least one of the countries before the United States. So at a time in which every individual handed this had traveled into Mexico, a country that would have required visas if they, and or a claim of asylum to let them in, they were allowed in only because your organizations, along perhaps with the UN, was in fact funding their trip to the United States. In other words, you were part of conduiting people to circumvent international law. Every one of those people, Haitian, Chinese, whatever, you're so proud of helping, had a right, and Mexico had an obligation. We circumvented that at federal taxpayers' expense so they could come to the United States, where we are spending $150 billion a year in support of them. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Issa, and we will do further rounds if you feel as though you have more questions on it. Got it. I now recognize Ranking Member Crow.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I had a line of questioning, but I feel really compelled to correct the record here because this last line of questioning was inaccurate and misleading in so many ways. First of all, this organization, I think people deserve to know that this organization that was the subject of the last round of questioning, HIAS, was actually founded in the wake of the Holocaust. Right after the Holocaust, the purpose of this organization was founded to help Jewish folks in Europe escape the pogroms of the Soviet Union, right, and actually help bring them to safety after the Holocaust. That's number one. Number two, at no time has the U.S. funded the specific programs that were at issue here, right? And there's a very big difference between funding an organization and then specific lines of effort. Number three, the information itself about navigating the Mexican immigration system actually is available on, wait for it, the CBP website of the United States, right? That is publicly available information on the Customs and Border Protection website. And then the last thing is, I just find it very disingenuous, frankly, when my colleagues will question somebody or come after a witness based on transcribed interview testimony and transcripts that they literally have refused over and over again to make public. Taking an interview of a witness and then refusing our requests to make that public so that the public can actually see the full context and the full meaning of what happened in those interviews, instead cherry picking certain parts to attack a witness. So I just wanted to level set that. And then Ms. Noyes would love to give you a minute or two of time to actually address the issues, since you didn't really have that opportunity to do so just now.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and I appreciate that, and I do want to reiterate the United States government did not fund the production of these slides. The United States government did fund activities and programs in Mexico to inform immigrants within Mexico of the ability to seek asylum. And in fact, the Mexican Asylum Agency has grown by 500%. Mexico is now one of the top asylum receiving countries in the world with over 140 applicants. And all of that has happened as a result of the assistance that has been appropriated by the Congress for PRM, and it has been very successful. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from any of the other witnesses on this? Okay. And just to be really clear, since my colleague referenced a component of U.S. law about knowingly making false or misleading statements to the U.S. government, you have at no time made false or misleading statements to the U.S. government.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you. Can you actually, I do think it's important, actually, this organization that has such a important history, Hyas, can you just tell folks a little bit about it and what this organization does?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for Hyas, but they are an important implementing partner for the United States. We have programs with them in several countries around the world. They are also one of the 10 resettlement agencies that help in the resettlement of refugees arriving legally in the United States after fleeing persecution and substantial vetting and processing overseas. They conduct programs on issues like preventing gender-based violence, providing support for medical services and other types of activities. They are a humanitarian agency, as you said, Congressman, founded in response to the pogroms in Russia, initially to help Jewish refugees, but then they have expanded their activities to support refugees and vulnerable people around the world.
And did this organization, in fact, do so, help Jewish refugees escape persecution?
Indeed. I mean, I can't speak for them. I don't know their entire history,
The
but it is
history,
a
yeah.
long and distinguished history.
Okay. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Crow. I'm going to wait until round 2 to ask questions, and I yield my time to Representative Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess sometimes you have to respond to the correcting of the record by correcting the record. In May, the department told Chairman McCall that the deck was used at a PRM-funded legal orientation sessions, the sessions provided by HIAS or HAS. So we funded the sessions in which they used the dock. Would you like to correct the record that we didn't fund it? If you fund the meeting and they use the deck, why is it and how is it that you can say you're telling us without trickery or any kind of misleading that this wasn't funded or at least enabled by the United States government, ma'am?
Again, Congressman, we did not fund the production of the deck, but that it is accurate that the deck was used in briefings where we were also informing migrants about the ability to seek asylum in Mexico.
Ma'am, it's wonderful that you're a great diplomat, because diplomats tell people to go to hell and make them pack and look forward to the trip, I guess. Because there is no truth in what you just said. It is extremely clear that if a group, I don't care who printed it or handed it out, a group you were funding waters and transportation, everything else, to bring to an event, host the event under the color of the United States of America, not the United Nations, and then you say, well, we didn't fund it, they got the money fungibly from somewhere else. Ma'am, there's not one American that would believe that. And by the way, to look at an organization and say, well, in the past, it had a great history, no question at all. My general counsel and one of my best friends was a refusenik that this organization probably helped his family get out. That's not what this organization's doing today, and it's not what you're paying for. If you fund them and your people see them handing out this deck, and pages 9, 10, and 11 are clearly not telling, in fact, not one bit of this document helps them stay in Mexico or implies they should. It makes it very clear that, in fact, this is how you circumvent law, by what you say to get into the United States. That is just the truth. And I appreciate Ranking Member Crow wanting to correct the record, but the record is the United States government paid for sessions in which knowingly this was used, and you still stand behind the statements made to this committee that you do not do it, and you were making those statements while people were handing this out at U.S. government-paid for events. Is that correct? Okay. So why is it that I'm going to ask you just one more time, because maybe Mr. Crow will see the light. Why is it you think that that is not somehow using funds if you bring people in and say, here, go ahead and use this deck that tells them how to get to America, and then you tell us that you don't in any way facilitate it?
Please turn your microphone on.
Sorry about that. We didn't fund the production of the slide deck. It was created in order to provide information to migrants who were participating in the Remain in Mexico program, the Migration Protection Protocols. PRM stopped funding for HIAS in Mexico in 2023. We do no funding for the agency.
Okay. Lastly, and the chairman's been very kind to give me this time, can you give this committee assurance today that no organization attends U.S. government-funded events in which these migrants are made available and provides similar information today?
Congressman, we are fully cognizant of the requirements in the 2024 Appropriations Act, which stipulates that. We are in full compliance with that. In fact, I sent letters to the heads of all international organizations that we fund to inform them of that stipulation. And so, yes, I can say unequivocally that such briefings are not happening with U.S. government funding.
Okay. Since I represent a border district, I have about 80 miles of the Mexican border east of San Diego. I go to that constantly. I have led many members of Congress and attorneys general and so on to them. I have stood at the fence and listened to U.S. government-backed NGOs, including Catholic Charities, talk through the fence and advise people on what to say as they're irregularly entering the United States. So I wish I could believe that you enforced your letters, but I appreciate that you say you've sent letters with that guidance. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much. Hopefully the record of correcting the record is now complete.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. It was an interesting dialogue to me. I understood it to be they had an audience of people, and maybe they didn't tell the audience of people, this is what's in the deck, but hey, come up here and by all means give this instruction, and you're also getting US dollars for something different, is kind of how I understood that. I'll have my own time for questions, but it does not seem above board. I recognize Ms. Dean for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for that interpretation of this conversation.
You're welcome.
You know, we have an expression that we often use here, which is I associate myself with the remarks of the gentleman who spoke before me. In this case, I'm going to say to you three honorable people leading groups that are trying to do good work around the world, I do not associate myself with the former line of questioning. I'm sorry that we all suffered through that. I'd rather focus on the good work that you are doing. Surely we have an oversight responsibility. I'm happy to be a part of that, to make sure that everything that we fund is executed as well as possible with the purpose it was intended for. But I do not associate myself with that kind of tearing down of other people. Ambassador, Secretary Noyes, in your written testimony, you didn't cite the example today, but I wanted to give you a chance. In your written testimony, you highlighted an example from one of your monitoring trips where a Venezuelan family was able to obtain asylum in Guatemala with the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration funded support. And they successfully have integrated into the community that they are in and working in Guatemala. Could you tell us a little bit about that one?
I'm happy to do so, Congresswoman. Venezuela is facing a mass migration situation. 6-7 million people have left the country. 94% of those people have actually remained in other countries in the Western Hemisphere. They are not coming to the United States.
94%.
16 out of 17. And that's in very large measure because of the types of activities and programs that PRM is funding. We have, for example, provided funding and assistance, capacity building in Colombia, which now hosts and has provided legal status for over 2 million Colombians. Ecuador, Peru, Brazil are doing the same. Mexico is providing massive amounts of asylum for people from around the world who've arrived in Mexico. Costa Rica has provided safe haven for 600,000 Nicaraguans. PRM is very proud on behalf of the American people to support efforts to support these governments as they seek to integrate people in our hemisphere. We work very hard on responsibility sharing with other governments in our hemisphere. And yes, I was delighted to meet that Venezuelan family. They make candy and they have settled in Guatemala and they are so happy. I similarly met a Venezuelan migrant in Mexico who settled there and has received asylum there through a program that PRM funded. And he told me now that his favorite food is tacos and he's looking for a nice Mexican girl to settle down and raise a beautiful Mexican family. And there are stories like that all over our hemisphere as a result of American taxpayer-funded programs and activities that I think uphold our values, but also our national security in helping to address the worldwide migration crisis and its consequences here in our hemisphere. So thank you for the question.
And I want to honor the extraordinary work you did in Chad and Sudan and just the devastating suffering that is going on there and the work you're trying to do there. With the detail of what you just talked about, this family with their candy company, what's it look like? Can you paint the picture? What does the assistance look like to get a family that kind of placement and thriving, the ability to thrive within a community? And then what impact does this have on the U.S. border?
Absolutely, happy to do so. The PRM funds activities like capacity building for asylum agencies and immigration services in other countries. We can provide support for database systems, or for, in Colombia, we funded a system to create new ID cards, like fraud-proof ID cards for for Venezuelan migrants in Colombia. We provide protection services to make sure that people are receiving protection and care to prevent them from being smuggled or trafficked. We also work very closely, again, through our diplomacy and our work with other governments in the hemisphere on responsibility sharing to address all of these issues. So all of this work goes to helping people who've had to flee their countries because they're fleeing persecution or war, violence, gangs, the effects of climate change sometimes, helping people to settle down and integrate in the country where they find themselves, and to find safety and to start a new life there. Everyone who starts a new life in another country in our hemisphere is someone who is not coming to our border, and that helps support our national security as well as our humanitarian objectives.
I see my time has expired, and I apologize I did not get a chance to speak with both of you, but I thank you for your work, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. Chair now recognizes Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. While I can applaud some of the work that actual USAID and State Department does, I think that we can identify the fact that there's been a continuous problem with the effectiveness, the implementation, and the actual oversight tracking of the grants and grantees that are actually going out there. Would we all agree with that? You wouldn't agree with that? Well, let me refer to you to the 2011 November OIG report that had to do with Afghanistan USAID grantee and sub-grantee programs, where they actually had found that where 67 hospitals and schools had been reported, the true findings was what? 3. 3 had been built out of that entire establishment. And you're going to tell me there's no problem with the subcommittee, the sub-grantees and grantees when you're talking about people like Creative Associates, DAI, Chemonics, all the USAID implementing partners who have actually admitted that they couldn't track the funding once it went to a sub-grantee? That's not a problem?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with this 2011 report that you're citing.
It's actually the USAID OIG report, November of 2011. It actually talked about a program called ASI South, the Afghan Stabilization Initiative South. Are you familiar with any ASI programs or the Ramp Up, the regional Afghan municipality programs, or any of these types of programs?
No, sir, that was 10 years before I joined PRM.
Well, I can tell you that nothing has changed since then, and this is what I'll go for. This is a short history of grant deficiencies. You know, the State Department engages in increasingly complex acquisitions, procurement needed services, and the department needs to ensure the contractors or grantees properly chose, work and conducted monitored objectives, and have problems getting the effectiveness being contained. That was the OIG in 17. In 18, they talked about oversight weaknesses and mismanagement, also increased possibilities that the purpose of the instruments will not actually be met. That was 2018. In 2019, they actually talked about the department entities domestically and abroad did not consistently and adequately monitor contract performance, conduct through invoice reviews, or oversee grants and foreign assistance programs. That's 2019. I can continue to go on and provide this list, 2020, 21, 22, 23, and even as recently as this year when the OIG reported that whether its resources are used for core operations or destined for contracts, cooperative agreements, or grants that further foreign assist programs, the department's ability to manage its significant resources efficiently and effectively continues to remain a challenge for us. Sounds to me like the OIG continuously, regardless of whether or not it was 10 years prior to your coming or not, over the last 10 years that I can show right here, the OIG reports that you're still having problems tracking the utilization of the fundings and sub-grantee money. Is that not correct?
Sir, I could tell you that the OIG has pointed to PRM's processes as a model. I could tell you that the grants, or the cooperative agreements that we have with NGOs involve considerable oversight and monitoring. And I can talk about our strong collaboration with OIG, with the Office of the Special Inspector for Afghan Reconstruction. We welcome this oversight. We'd like to collaborate with them. We're always looking to improve
So
our
you're familiar with
monitoring.
SIGAR?
Yes.
And you're familiar that SIGAR's reported time after time the misuse and abuse of funding, American taxpayers' funding, like things, as an example, the KHPP Kandahar Helmand Power Project that resulted in $3+ billion.
Would the gentleman yield? I have a clarifying question.
Sure.
Would the gentleman clarify for me, are you referring to an OIG report done by the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID?
And also the State Department OIG reports.
So I think it would be helpful, I think these are melding because you referenced a whole bunch of USAID reports. Obviously, this is a State Department panel.
I understand that, but the State Department does actually provide the oversight for USAID. Am I not correct in this in some way?
I understand that. I think it would be helpful because there's confusion and melding with the questioning. If you could just clarify for the witnesses which reports you're talking about.
For the Vice Chairman here, do we not, when we appropriate things under the State and Foreign Ops budget, does that not include State Department and USAID, and State Department ultimately has the oversight of that funding?
But there are different OIGs.
I understand that,
Yes.
but both OIGs have reported that there is an issue with the grantee and sub-grantee programs when it comes to
Yeah, and what I'm
tracking
asking the
funding.
gentleman to clarify is when he's asking questions, if you could just be more
Let's
specific.
go ahead and talk about SIGAR.
Okay,
Most of those
I'm
were
not
in
debating the
reference to that to
gentleman. I'm
begin.
just asking if the gentleman will
Reclaiming my
clarify
time. Reclaiming my time.
which OIG they're
Reclaiming my
referring
time.
to.
Let me ask this question to make it easy. If a grantee fails to comply with the terms of its grant agreement or otherwise violates U.S. law, is the grantee suspended from receiving further U.S. funding?
Yes, and I can give you examples of when we've done that in PRM.
Okay, can you explain how that process works?
So we have a very robust system of monitoring and evaluation that includes written reports, performance reports, financial reports, desk audits, interviews, site visits, as I described in my testimony. And when, in the course of conducting this oversight, we find that a recipient of U.S. funding, one of our cooperative agreements, is failing to meet the benchmarks that we have agreed on, then we have suspended funding. We did that in
So can you tell me where we're at then? And I appreciate that. With the implementer of the Atheism grant that was referred for suspension, where is that now?
Mr. Mills, let me pause you for a minute. Your time has expired, but we are about to move into round two.
No worries. I just assumed that since the Vice Chair wanted to claim some of the time, which
I'm more
I
than
was
happy
to do.
Since it goes to our side, start with you for round two if you want to roll into this. Would you like to? Because you can have 5 minutes now if you want.
No, that's right. Go ahead.
Okay. We're going to roll into round two of questions. I'll begin with myself. We'll continue to go back and forth I do want to start with something under the title of correcting the record with my ranking member. This was a letter from Naz Darakalu referencing the numerous times that we spoke about the Atheism grant. And by the way, it was an Atheism grant. This is a copy of the Atheism grant. It says promoting and defending religious freedom inclusive of atheists, humanists, non-practicing, and non-affiliated individuals. It goes into various specifics on it, but you spoke as well, Mr. Hussein, about there wasn't anything on atheism. There is. But I want to go to the record of what Naz Darakalu sent us following, let's see, all of the times that we asked about it: April 18, June 8, June 19, October 20, November 9, November 29, November 30, all in 2023, February 16, August 3, February 22, March 30, to April 18, 2024, and other hearings that we had here. And here was the short part of the response that I want to read. The department has since learned that the documents provided by the grantee to the department and in turn the committee were not in fact the version of the slides used in the relevant training. I'll submit this for the record. And the long and the short of this is State Department, Naz, Secretary Verma all came back to this committee and said, hey, all those times we testified to you or wrote you letters about atheism and that not happening, turns out we were dead wrong. And in fact, the slides actually showed they were doing this, and we're telling you that we didn't get the full slide deck from them, and so I hope that, as the ranking member said, he would correct the record. He would take that as that is the correction of the record by State Department. They did literally over and over and over tell us the wrong thing, lie to us, whatever you want to call it. That's what happened, and they acknowledged it. So it has been revealed that the State Department actively promoted atheist and humanist groups and their membership in clear violation of the Establishment Clause. So you stated, Ambassador Hussein, you began in 2022. What month of 2022? Okay, how many people report to you?
Approximately 40.
Approximately 40. And did you know that this was a violation of the Establishment Clause, or when did you learn of that?
So the program that you've cited, Congressman, was a program that I believe was approved in 2020 internally, and you cited the title of the program. It's a program
approved in 21.
The internal process by which it was created, and then it went out in 2021.
Did you know it was a violation of the Establishment Clause?
No.
When you learned about it? When did you learn about it?
I learned about the program when I came on board. I believe it was finalized internally in the department in 2020. It started in 2021. I came in, the focus of our work.
You learned about it in 22 when you came on board,
yes.
And you didn't jump out at you and say, this is a violation of the Establishment Clause?
The program, as you read correctly, the title is a program to defend religious freedom of people around the world, inclusive of atheists and humanists. So it is a program.
Did you ever think there were problems with this grant? When you, in 2022, when you learned about it, at any point did you like, I'm not sure if this is above board, let me at least dig into this a little more? Did that occur at all?
Absolutely, Congressman. We've had back and forth with the committee, and we take our responsibility to be responsive to oversight very seriously. So there's been a number of letters that have gone back and forth. There was a request to produce documents regarding the NOFO, and we responded to each one of those requests. Then there was a request about documents as a part of the grant as it's being implemented.
I just want to let you know, I'm happy to let you speak because I'm going to take as many rounds as this takes. I don't care if we go to round 20 to get through this, but I'm going to have a number of questions on this. So by all means, speak as long as you want it, because actually right now you're digging a hole for yourself.
I appreciate the opportunity to get to the bottom of it as well, sir, because as we found out more information, and we found the slide, which the committee requested slides. We immediately went to the implementing partner and asked for those documents as well. And as soon as we received it, I believe it was on April 17th, we notified, you mentioned the call that you received on April 19th, as soon as we could, and then recommend the matter to Office of Inspector General. I take very seriously as
you
someone.
You think that's the first time that there was correspondence in that way? Like, hey, there's concerns. Let's make sure that you get us the appropriate slides. Yeah. Would you say that, to your knowledge, that's the first time?
We have quarterly correspondence with our implementing partners. We have written materials that come in, performance evaluations, financial reports. So we are in a rigorous process of checking in as per our requirements by law to check in with our implementing partners, and we've done that including through site visits. As we learn more information about the questions that the committee requested, we've tried our best to provide that information to the committee. And as someone that works on a day-to-day basis on literally saving the lives of people that are suffering around the world, Christians that are being persecuted for blasphemy and apostasy. I mentioned, for example, the recent political prisoners that came from Nicaragua, those that we welcome from China, individuals that have been sentenced to death for leaving their faith, for example. Our focus on a day-to-day basis is to make sure that we're engaging that diplomatic work, that we are also overseeing the many, many programs that we have around the world. We take every single penny seriously. And so when there was a suggestion to me when I came into this role that perhaps there is promotion of atheism, my initial reaction was, it's completely against the law to promote atheism. I do not accept that, or to promote any religious faith in this job. As a person of faith myself, I take very seriously the importance of protecting the religious freedom of all people around the world, and the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998 requires us to protect the religious freedom of all, including people that don't have any particular belief. And so my understanding of the grant when I came in is that it is designed to protect the right of individuals not to follow any particular faith. That's something that's been championed by Representative Chris Smith, who's been a tremendous supporter of our efforts and our religious freedom work around the world. He has said himself that he will support the right of individuals to not belong to any particular faith community. And the Earth Act itself says that the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion is understood to protect theistic and non-theistic beliefs, and the right not to profess or practice any religion. So I actually think there's more that we agree on than it might seem. I think we all agree in this room that it's our responsibility to protect the religious freedom of all people around the world. That could extend to protecting the rights of people not to believe. And we all believe that promoting any particular religious faith using taxpayer dollars is wrong. And it is wrong to promote atheism. It is wrong to promote any particular religious faith using American tax dollars, period, full stop. And that is my belief, and that is how we've tried to execute the work of our office. And if there are times when there's a grantee that has done something that causes concern or has done something otherwise, then it's my responsibility and our responsibility as an office to come to you and to say, we've discovered something that may not be in line with that mandate and that responsibility. And it is our responsibility to then report that to the Office of Inspector General. They have a number of responses that they are able to execute themselves, including going back and retrieving the money if it was ever used in an improper way. So, Congressman, that's all I'll say. I share the concerns that you have, and I do not want to see a single penny of U.S. taxpayer dollar used to promote any particular religious faith or atheism.
So you have gone well over my time. Like I said, I'm happy to let you speak and expound. We are in rounds of 5 minutes. I do have to go to my counterpart, Ranking Member Crow. I am going to put something up for you to reflect on while he is asking you questions or other people questions, just so you can read it and digest it and be prepared to answer on it. Could you put that up a minute? And what it specifically says, this is State Department speaking to Humanist International, the atheist group, and what it specifically says, our in-person meeting, December 2022 meeting with redacted team leader from State Department and redacted program officer from State Department and person from Humanist International is when I was first instructed to revise the language in all official grant documents to, quote, neutralize the language in all materials that were submitted to State Department, the ones that we would be able to see. Neutralize the language for the stuff that we will be able to see. The changes to language did not impact the activities that we were doing, that were carried out. The activities remained the same. We just changed the language of what we were reporting to State Department. I was instructed by State Department to exclude and or remove such language from official grant documents. I was not instructed to exclude or remove the language from the program documents, the actual materials that people were given. No changes to program activities were requested by State Department. I'm not going to ask you any questions on it. Stare at it, look at it, read it, reflect on it, think about it. I'm going to go to my colleague, and then I'm going to hammer you on it. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Hussein. You were, I think, in my view, very clear in your prior recitation here about our policy and how you manage the office, and that's aligned with how Congress has dictated that this be done. But to just run through it in a more succinct way, your office does not promote atheism or any other belief set. Is that correct?
That is correct, Congressman.
But your job is not to promote, but to protect people's rights to believe or non-believe as they see fit, correct?
That is our responsibility, and that is what has been done by my predecessors on a bipartisan basis as well.
And under law, atheism is a non-belief set that would fall under law as one of those beliefs or non-beliefs that are protected.
Yes, and specifically in 2016, and the amendments to the Earth Act clarified that atheism or non-belief is to be protected under the International Religious Freedom Act.
This is the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act that was passed in 2016 and enacted into law in 2017. Is that correct?
That's right.
And it specifically amended to include non-belief or atheism as a protected belief or non-belief set.
Yeah, just to clarify further, it was already required in the 1998 Act, but just made it that much more clear.
Yeah.
Right.
I'd like to enter the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act into the record.
Without objection?
This is the one that you had mentioned was actually a Republican-led effort by Mr. Smith.
That's right, and we continue to work with Representative Smith. Congressman Wolf is someone that we've worked very closely with. He's been a commissioner on the International Religious Freedom Commission, and enjoy our cooperation with him as well.
Okay, and the way you tailor things, it's my understanding that your office will tailor your programming to approaches to meet the needs of specific places in the world. So in some places it might be Christians, another place it might be those of Jewish faith or Muslims or Hindus or non-believers. Different places have different concerns and different threats to individuals that you are working to help defend. Is that correct?
If you have a moment to yield, I'd love to give you a clarifying point on our argument. Whenever you, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
Sure, if the gentleman could just answer the question, then it'd be great to.
By all means.
That's right, and I will say that as someone who has experience previously in my career doing work in Muslim-majority countries specifically, and work on the protection of Christian minorities, countering anti-Semitism, and the protection of other religious minorities, that has been a specific interest that I've brought into this position as well. And so we take our responsibility very seriously to protect people of all faiths everywhere, all around the world.
And then you do oversight. So in instances where you have a grantee or there's a program that you're supporting that is not aligned with our standards or violate any of our laws or standards, you fix that.
Absolutely.
Right? And in the case of this particular grant that some of my colleagues were referencing, you all provided, it's our understanding, my understanding, that you all provided the materials you had available. That was what you believed was being used, and it was drawn to your attention that other things were being used. You then provided that, you disclosed it, and you dealt with it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. The clarifying point was simply, nobody disputes that atheism is included in the IRFA. It's about whether they wrote a grant to promote atheism specifically. That is the point of contention. And just in case you want it, here is a timeline of, we did start reaching out to them back in 22, about 15 times before they actually did get back to us.
No,
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I certainly understand that issue. There's the broader assertions. I think along with some of the specific allegations against you all, there's just this implication about overall policy that I wanted to clarify, as well as the specific issues about knowingly misleading the committee or Congress, which I just see no evidence of. That in the regular course of oversight, things are identified, things are fixed. You just can't run programs without occasionally finding things. And I agree with that. I agree with my colleagues on this, that if there's an issue that violates something, fix it, right? We should not be promoting any one belief set or non-belief set. And certainly in this case, it was identified and it was fixed.
And I want to fix it more than anyone else if there is an issue, because I spend 99 point, some percentage of my time fighting for the rights of people of faith around the world. Yes, there are atheist communities around the world. We protect their rights as well. But any insinuation that the office is set up to protect or promote atheism is misrepresentative of the fact that the vast majority of the work that we do is helping people that are in dire straits, people of faiths that I mentioned in my opening statement and in some of our exchange here. And that's a responsibility that we take very seriously.
And if I may, another 30 seconds or so, I just want to also go into this issue of bad faith or knowingly withholding things. At any time, Mr. Hussein, were you in the possession of this purported slide deck, or this slide deck that not purported but actually does exist? Where you withheld that and did not provide it for any lengthy period of time to prevent it from coming into the purview of this committee?
No, sir, I believe that we were in possession of it on the 17th of April and provided it by the 19th.
Okay, thank you. Yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Crow. And FYI, they provided an inaccurate slide deck and then later provided an accurate one.
But can I clarify that?
Please, by all means.
But they provided what they had, right? They provided the slide that they had been given, and it was later clarified that was not the one being used. So that was actually oversight that worked. Something was inaccurate by a grantee. They found, came in possession of the accurate one. They almost immediately disclosed that to the committee, and it's since been fixed. That's my understanding.
It's actually a couple of years after they told their implementing partner, neutralize your language. Don't neutralize what you're doing with the program, neutralize your language. So we'll certainly get into that, and we can have some more back and forth on that. But bear in mind, this was not immediately. There were several years of stonewalling, and if you recall, we did have a hearing where you chastised the staff members of this committee. I believe it was you chastised the staff members of this committee for being in Nepal and actually going to speak with the people on the ground there. It was only in speaking in person with the people on the ground there that oversight was actually being able to conduct it. That's where they actually, oh crap, they actually caught us red-handed. Now we need to start turning over stuff. That was after years of questions.
And if I may, Chairman,
please,
since you're
dialogue by all means.
Yeah,
open
no,
now.
I mean, listen, I'm not going to get into an argument here. When you reference that incident, that was about spending over $80,000 on a taxpayer-funded trip that I believe was excessive. But
it was a bipartisan Codell
the charge of bad faith by this department simply is not supported by the facts. I think that's been made very clear by the witnesses here, and I will always vigorously contest any allegation of bad faith, as distinguished from valid, legitimate oversight that both the department and this committee conducts. Thank
So
you.
it was a bipartisan staff delegation to numerous places, and them going over there and being on the ground in Nepal. That is oversight that they conducted, no doubt about it. But again, it has been pointed out, it was absolutely bad faith, but we're going to get into that more. It is now time for, I do have to recognize Mr. Mills. I can't go to you first because we have two members that haven't been here for questions yet. But we are, you will be after that, and then in the next round it comes back to me. So I've used my time. We will go to, is it Ranking Member Perry or McCormick that's up next? All right. Chair recognizes Representative McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go with Ms. Noyes. You're the Assistant Secretary of the State Department Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, commonly known as PRM. What does the P or population and PRM refer to in your Bureau's title?
It refers to the provision of information and diplomacy with regard to population policies in international organizations.
Okay, does that have anything to do with abortion?
The United States government does not, PRM does not support, fund, or in any way provide support for abortion or abortion services.
Okay, thank you. Interesting, I was concerned that when I saw social media content on one of PRM's partners in Mexico, there was a advertisement that we pulled down and actually printed out for us. They kind of concerned me a little bit. This entity is called the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Are you familiar with HIAS? Some of my colleagues mentioned it earlier. It's promoting abortion services for Mexican migrants or people migrating through Mexico. I can show you the brochures. As a matter of fact, this is one of them. This basically tells migrants where to call if they need an abortion. It's an associated advertisement. Here's another post when migrants ask if they know their sexual reproductive rights, referring them to, once again, abortive active resources. The Instagram post raised the question that I must ask: does the PRM fund any sort of abortion processes in Mexico?
No, I will tell you what we do fund, and
It's okay. That's all I really want to know. I understand what you
the
do.
State Department does not fund abortion or abortion services in Mexico or in any other country. We are in full compliance
Got it.
with all U.S. laws.
So it does not directly or indirectly support abortion. I got it. With that said, I have a poster here. If you look at the one on that side, it basically talks about different places that we support, PRM, that we fund even. And that these facilities right here are all associated, including 7, which is a place where you get abortions, that we support financially. The PRM does fund, in fact, the International Organization for Migration, IOM. And as you can see on the next poster, it provides various healthcare centers across Mexico, and that's the map right there. Then you look at the third poster, the same health center appears in the Mexican government's list of abortion providers that we support. So if the PRM does give money to IOM, and IOM funds the entities of the Mexican government that says they provide abortions, how does it stay consistent with our message that we just talked about?
Congressman, again, PRM does not fund abortion or abortion services in Mexico or anywhere else. Whether there are other partners or whether there are partners that are doing so, they are not doing so with U.S. funding. We are in full compliance with U.S. law on this point.
So if U.S. law is we don't fund it, but we're funding the IOM, and the IOM is funding this center that does abortions, how do we fix that? Because it is a violation of law.
We do not fund abortion or abortion services. What we do fund is maternal and child health, menstrual hygiene products like tampons and sanitary pads, provision of prenatal vitamins, care for pregnant women or for complications following pregnancy like fistula.
I've seen the same kind of sleight of hand in the United States too, where we say, no, we're just funding these abortion centers for the things that they're not doing for abortions, which saves them all the money they need to do everything else. It's like, I'm going to fund the Democratic Party, but only for things that everybody agrees on. Well, that means they get to save the money for the things we don't agree on. As a matter of fact, the same people that we give funds to in America that do abortions then fundraise for the same party that's feeding it the money. It's a self-licking ice cream cone. And it is illegal. We are a nation of laws. Federal funds are forbidden to be used for abortions for migrants in this country or another country. And we're supporting organizations that are then, in turn, supporting abortion clinics, essentially. We are funding, this goes back to the WHO. It goes back to research centers in China that are doing gain of function. If we're funding them, even though we're not supposed to be doing gain of function, and they do it anyways, it's still American funds used on places for nefarious purposes, or at least illegal at the very best. And I think if we're having an honest discussion, I think the money needs to be tracted from these organizations that are funding things that we are not supposed to be funding. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Chair now recognizes Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Noyes, my understanding, I'm sorry you're on the hot seat here, but you've got a lot of topics apparently people are interested in. So my understanding that PRM is providing funding for transportation, shelter, cash, and debit cards, and legal counseling in Mexico, aiding the flow of migrants to the U.S. border. And maybe you wouldn't characterize it as aiding, but I think it providing those things does aid they're coming to America through Mexico. PRM defined a dollar amount ranging from $212 to $486 in the form of cash and voucher assistance to migrants. Now, when testifying for the Foreign Affairs transcribed interview, at the time, I don't think you knew the number of migrants receiving funds in Mexico or how frequently migrants apply for CVA. And I'm not sure you knew the categories or types of what spending would be prohibited. Do you know those figures now? Do you have that?
Congressman, I can tell you that the funding that PRM provides for non-governmental organizations and for cash and voucher assistance in Mexico is less than 10% of the total assistance that PRM provides in Mexico. That funding is directed to about 10% of the people who are seeking asylum in Mexico. We give them very limited amounts of funding so that they can remain safely in Mexico while awaiting adjudication of their asylum claims in Mexico. And I do have a specific figure that I can give you. We have one NGO partner that provides cash and voucher assistance in Mexico. It serves 1,845 people and provided $175,000, which comes to less than $100 per person for the year in Mexico.
Okay. I didn't ask for the percentage, but that's fine. I guess I'm supposed to feel good about that. So are you saying that PRM only provides funding through the NGO or at the 10% level or what have you, only to migrants transiting through Mexico if they are remaining in Mexico? You don't provide any of that funding if they're going to continue to transit Mexico to the United States?
That is my understanding.
That's your understanding. And can we have that, can this committee request that that documentation regarding that understanding that you have be provided to us?
We will be happy to follow up.
Okay. The UNHCR received more funding than any other organization, PRM, with funding levels at $46 million. Then the UNHCR takes that money and maybe it's a derogatory term to say funnels, but it distributes those millions of dollars to other organizations to carry out such services as legal counseling to asylum seekers and migrants. PRM, in 2022, PRM also funded the UN International Organization for Migration, or IOM, with $30.5 million for activities in Mexico, which is an increase in $5 million from 2021. Do you think, I mean, look, you're dealing with all these folks and these agencies, do these millions of dollars provided by the taxpayers of the United States, do you think they're an incentive to migrants who, let me ask it, maybe a better way to ask it this way. That money that is spent through the UNHCR or IOM, does it require that migrants be vetted first before that money is spent on them for legal services or what have you? Vetting.
Our partners, and this is part of our agreements with them and the oversight that we conduct with them, absolutely check on the beneficiaries, figure out who really needs the assistance, and provide assistance only to those who really are the most vulnerable. And in Mexico...
I'm sorry, I'm running out of time here. Everybody's vulnerable when you leave your country and you're transiting. I think everybody'd be vulnerable in Mexico doing that journey. But I'm talking about vetting to come to the United States of America. Are they vetted prior to this? There's a lot of money. That's $30.5 million and $46 million. So, $86.5 million is spent on legal services, et cetera, for these people transiting Mexico to come to the United States. Do we require them to be vetted before they get access to that money in the form of legal services and other services that they would receive as a result of that money?
We do not provide that funding in order to help people go to the United States. On the contrary, that funding is provided in order to provide assistance to people where they are. And as I had indicated earlier, it's to build up the Mexico Asylum Agency to provide support for people to remain in Mexico and seek asylum there. We also provide funding for assisted voluntary returns for people to return to their country of origin, to cease from those trips.
Do you
We've also-
have figures? Look, I appreciate that narrative. I, for one, don't believe any of it. I think it is designed to assist and aid people to come to the United States illegally. That's what it's used for. And I think there's probably a small percentage that return back to their country. I also don't believe that anybody is required to be vetted before receiving the assistance that comes through those programs. Can you provide any metrics to prove what you just said?
Certainly, we would be happy to provide information about the assistance that we have provided to Mexico's asylum agency, which has grown by 500% and has over 140,000 asylum claims in Mexico for people to remain in Mexico. We'd be very happy to provide further information.
So what I'm looking for, just so that you don't go back to work and kind of chase your tail.
Your time has expired, but you are up for another round in just a moment if you like.
Okay,
and
I'll hold, I yield.
You'll be up in, I guess, 5, 10,
Yeah.
10 minutes. So we are moving to another round. This is going to go back to myself. If we could just make sure to give the quotes from what State Department told to, quote, neutralize the language. Quote, neutralize the language. Don't neutralize the program language. Neutralize the language of what you're reporting back to state. And then we wonder, why would Humanist International provide an inaccurate deck of slides to State Department? Why would they provide, only a small percentage of the slides instead of the slides that talk about promoting and expanding atheism in Nepal? Why would that? Well, because they were directed by State Department, revise the language in all official grant documents to neutralize the language in all materials that were submitted to State Department. No changes to impact the planned activities, no changes to the program language, no requests there. So here's my question number one. Was it you that told them to neutralize the language?
No, sir. And I share your interest in understanding the proper interpretation of the language.
I'll let you get to your response. I'm glad you share my interest. I'm going to go back to something I said in my opening statement. Either you didn't know and you should be pissed off, or you knew and you didn't care, or your people knew and they didn't care and you should be really pissed off, or you knew and you tried to hide it. Any of those things should result in being really, really pissed off. Now, please respond.
Yes, I share your interest in understanding the interpretation of the language. Now, I will say very clearly that if there is any effort whatsoever to do anything to use American tax dollars to promote atheism, that's wrong. And that's not something that I associate myself with or
That's
our
the grant.
office with.
You
Now,
acknowledge that was the grant, right? And Secretary Verma and Durakalu all came back and said, yes, this is what was, we have the letter here, I submitted it for the record. They came back and said, yes, this is what the slides were doing, this is what we were doing. Your State Department said it.
To answer your question, Congressman, respectfully, the grant is a grant that is designed to protect individuals that hold particular religious faiths, or it's inclusive of individuals that don't hold any particular faith. It is not a grant that is designed to promote atheism. It is not permitted to promote
atheists. Promote atheists.
Right, but if you
Promote
read,
atheists.
if we read the entire title of
Promote
the
and
grant-
defend religious freedom inclusive of atheists. So promote and defend atheists, promote and defend humanists, promote and defend non-practicing, non-affiliated individuals. No
So
doubt about it.
consistently with the
Nobody
language of the law.
told you guys you have to write a grant to promote atheism. Yes, you can go out there and do a number of different things. Nobody told you, Congress didn't write a law that said, hey, go out there and write a grant to promote atheism. But to my question, again, were you the one that directed them to neutralize the language that we would be able to read?
No, Congressman, and that is why we did not write a grant
Who
to promote
directed them to
atheism.
neutralize the language that Congress was going to read?
Look, I'm looking at the same
Who-
language you are.
Who directed? Who was that?
The language I see is revised language in all official grant documents. If you have the rest of the document, I'd be happy. I'm just as interested.
We'll
in you
definitely
to
get that
read
for you.
the whole document to
Who was
understand
it?
what it is.
Who
I do not.
is that team lead program officer?
I do not know who this meeting was with in December.
So this is new
2022.
information to you that somebody was directed to neutralize. You're not familiar with this.
Neutralize the language in the official grant documents. I'm more interested in learning what that means.
That wasn't an answer.
Yeah.
Is this new information to you, or did you know this already?
I haven't seen these bullets that are on the board.
Okay, this is directly from Humanist International, following, and by the way, let's take a step back in time. We've gone back and forth in a lot of different rounds, but I want to go back and say, remember, this grant came about in 2021. It was awarded. June of 22, Congress wrote the first letter about this saying, hey, we have concerns about this grant. We were stonewalled. The first correspondence went out from your office. You were there at the time in 22, where the implementing partner expressed concerns to State Department about our oversight letter. Humanist International said, hey, what's going on with Congress? They're up our tail. What's going on with this? And they were told by State Department, we're taking care of this. That was the quote by State Department. We're taking care of this. Now, again, fast forward in time to just a little while, and we know that in December of 2022, you guys said neutralize the language of anything. You said you didn't do it. You said this is new to you, that you didn't know somebody directed them to neutralize the language. Should somebody be fired for telling them to neutralize the language?
Congress, that's a very serious action. I would want to know what it means in this context to neutralize the language of what. It says all materials in official grant documents. That's not the same thing as slides.
That's right.
I want to know exactly
Don't change the slides that you're delivering. Don't change the program materials. Just change what you're reporting back to us.
I'm interested in knowing how we can interpret that to mean slides.
Let's talk about this a little bit more in about 10 minutes when I get time again.
Yeah, if you have the rest of the document, I'd love to see it. And I'm just as interested as you are in understanding.
We're going to lean this right up front so you can lean on, you can look at it, reflect on it, have some more opinions about it when I get back to you in about 10 minutes after my colleagues ask some more questions. I am now going to recognize Ranking Member Crow for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm sorry you had to sit through that, Mr. Hussein. Do you know why you've never seen this? And that's a rhetorical question. It's because this, what you were just asked about, is the transcript from a transcribed interview done by staff of this committee that has never been released to the public. So you've never seen this.
That's correct.
Right? The public has never seen this. Right? And despite repeated attempts by the minority to get the majority to release this, they have repeatedly refused to do so. So this was an interview that was done by the committee of a former employee of the organization in question, not one of your employees, not one of the State Department employees. So I just wanted to clarify what it is we're talking about and why you might be confused about what you're being asked about, because you haven't seen it. Nobody outside of this committee has seen it.
Do you want to yield for a clarifying point?
Sure.
No member, as far as I know, no Democrat representative showed up to that.
Oh, okay. And just to clarify mine, it wasn't a transcript, it was written answers. So it actually wasn't even, it wasn't an actual interview. It was a written answer submitted by, but not released to the public. It's my understanding that this has not been released by the committee. Is that
Certainly released to your side.
Yeah, but we have asked for it to be released. Okay.
Yeah, I'll get you an answer about whether the broader public has.
In the meantime, because it's my understanding that you all have not released it. In any event, you haven't seen it. And do you know what this language neutralize mean? Is this language you use?
Is designed to protect the religious freedom of all individuals, inclusive of atheists. And there are organizations that may be humanist that are doing work and training.
Well, my question is different, though. This language, this neutralization language, do you have any idea what that means?
No, and I'm trying to...
And is that language you've ever used?
No, and...
Is that language that you've directed in your staff to ever use?
No, especially not in the context that is being implied here, that neutralize might mean something to do with allowing promotion of atheism.
And context matters a lot, which is why we've asked for these written answers to be released, because I'll tell you why context matters, because the written answers also say something interesting. I don't have one of these big boards. I wish I did. But the written answers say this. This same individual said in the written answers that she understood the obligation, quote, to not use funding to promote or proselytize any religious or non-religious belief over another, but rather to promote the inclusive right of religious freedom including non-religious for all, end quote.
That's correct.
Specifically clarifying that was their understanding.
That's
That
correct.
also is in the written answers, and that's why context matters. I don't know, did you guys get any clarification on whether or not these written answers have been released?
Yes, I do. Not released to the public, and my understanding is DEM staff received the same offer, did not want to make these things public for basically the same reason that you all asked for the descent cable in Afghanistan. You guys didn't want certain names released.
Well, names, yes, to protect individuals against reprisals, but we have repeatedly wanted these to be released for this reason, actually, because it allows
You
a
guys
better,
do
more.
have them, but that was the why.
We do have them. Yeah, no,
Didn't
there's
want
no
certain
doubt,
names
there's no
released.
doubt about that, which is actually why I have this quote. And why I have this context, which is important, why I asked the question, and why I think it's important that the public see it. And for you all, frankly, to see it.
If you'd like their names released now, just make that request by all means.
No, then we're talking about something different. I think it's important in all of these contexts to protect people's names, because we don't want people to be subject to fear and intimidation or reprisal. But the content, I think, is important for folks to see. Ms. Dyer, you are doing a phenomenal job today. In 40 seconds, are there any stories that you would like to tell, because your department does just amazing work to combat human trafficking? Would love to just give her a minute to chime in here.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and really just to sort of like thank you guys. I really feel like the successes that we have had in the Trafficking in Persons Office is due to hardworking staff, bipartisan support from Congress, and really working together in partnership to both prevent the crime, prosecute the bad guys, and protect the victims. It's an honor to get to work on this issue. It's an honor to get to collaborate with all of you, and I'm happy to answer any further questions that you have.
Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
You have been very patient. So I now recognize Representative Perry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Noyes, I think from my standpoint for this committee, I misspoke. It was 76.5 million. You should never do math in public, but that I counted up there. But you said 10% essentially. But whether it's 10% or whatever of the 76.5 million, I would like to know if you can provide for us how many recipients, how many of those recipients were actually returned to their country, how many of the recipients were vetted, how many were not vetted prior to receiving the funding, and how many of these recipients remained in Mexico while they sought their asylum claim. I think that would at least help illuminate. Look, I don't want to be unduly critical. I represent, like everybody else here, 760,000 people. They get up early in the morning, they go to work, they're paying their taxes. We're borrowing money every single time we vote here to pay for all this stuff. We're borrowing. This is all borrowed money. And, you know, I can't speak for anybody else's district, but the district I represent, people can't afford their groceries, their gasoline, their electricity bills, their daycare bills, their normal daily needs. And when we're spending that kind of money, that amount of money, I would say it encourages people to come to the United States, but maybe you're right, maybe I'm wrong, but I should be able to tell my bosses, this is where your tax money's being spent, this is how it's being used, and right now I can't do that, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Perry, can I borrow a moment from you?
Absolutely, yield to the chair.
I was frustrated in your last dialogue because she had Ms. Val's Noise, I didn't mean to say that incorrectly, had a dialogue with Representative Issa in which the specifics of the dialogue, please correct me if I'm wrong, were they were funding a group. That same group was providing literal materials on how to circumvent U.S. immigration law, but they were paying the same group to do other things. So it's not what we were paying them to do. They were using other monies to literally give these documents on how to circumvent U.S. immigration law. We were paying for the other stuff. Yes, it was done at the same events. Yes, they were invited to the same audience. Maybe they were at an audience for, I don't know, receiving information on something, and they were given that information by this group, happened to be paid by the U.S., but they were also delivering this. It was frustrating to me that when you were asking your questions about whether they are doing different things, funding these groups and teaching them how to circumvent immigration law. Do I have a misunderstanding of your dialogue there? Yes, you funded this group that was directing people to circumvent immigration law. Your claim is that you were not funding them to do that. They must have got the money from somewhere else to do that. But yes, they were doing that at State Department-sponsored events or where there was an audience for United States Department of State.
Congressman, although we did not fund the slides, it is absolutely true that nothing in those slides was intended to circumvent U.S. immigration law. In fact, it was to provide correct information about U.S. immigration law as opposed to the garbage that smugglers and traffickers put out. And the information in those slides is all information that is readily available on multiple U.S. government websites.
If it was such corrective information, why wouldn't you want to fund that? You were very specific that you didn't fund that.
Because we only funded that organization to provide support for asylum procedures in Mexico.
And Mr. Issa did speak again very specifically about where that group was directing people to circumvent U.S. immigration law. And yes, you happen to be funding them as well, but certainly a frustrating point to not.
But Congressman
level.
Perry, if I could, I appreciate your question about who is receiving cash and voucher assistance in Mexico funded by our partners, UNHCR and IOM. I can tell you that other countries also contribute funding to those organizations for cash and voucher assistance. So we will need to do some analysis to figure out how much of that funding came from American taxpayers versus other taxpayers, but I'm very happy to take the question back, and I appreciate it.
I apologize for not using your full Val's noise. I apologize, ma'am.
I have one more question.
Noise is fine, thanks.
Okay, but now, based on that information, and look, we get that other countries fund some of this stuff, and God bless them, that's great, but I'm a representative of the American people, so that's my interest. Is there a prohibition in the State Department for funding organizations that would, look, these people are coming across the border illegally, right? Unless they're vetted and they've waited for their asylum claim, they're coming across the border illegally. Is there anything in State Department documentation that prohibits the use of those funds to be used to inform or provide care, comfort, whatever, to people that are crossing the border illegally?
The 2024 appropriation passed by Congress made clear to us that that the United States may not provide funding to assist with provision of information about U.S. immigration proceedings or about legal representation in the United States. And I have sent letters to all of our partners explicitly pointing that out to them. So yes, as a result of the legislation
Okay.
passed by this Congress, that is the case.
All right, thank you, Ms. Val's noise.
Chair now recognizes Representative Burchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I think I came in and introduced myself earlier as the chairman, but I had the wrong office, or the wrong deal, but it really didn't matter. I take it upon myself to confuse people on a daily time, so consider yourself one of those. Ms. Ball's noise, did I get that right?
Honestly, just noise is fine.
Well, I'm going to get it right. If it says right here, I'm going to try to do it, because nobody ever gets my dadgum name right, and it kind of ticks me off sometimes. How much money does the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration give in cash and voucher assistance to immigrants?
Congressman, cash and voucher assistance is a well-proven, internationally recognized tool to support vulnerable people. We provide cash and voucher assistance all over the world. I was recently in Cote d'Ivoire, where our partners were providing cash assistance to Burkinabe refugees who had to flee the fighting there. We provide cash and voucher assistance to migrants all over the world. And I'll give you a specific example. The 135 Nicaraguan political prisoners who left that country 2 weeks ago that Ambassador Hussein was mentioning earlier, we provided them with $180 each because they needed, when they got out of Nicaragua, they had nothing. So
Right.
they arrived in Guatemala, we got them lodging, we got them food, they got standard issue sweatshirts, but we gave them $180 each so that they could buy underwear, shoes,
Right.
clothing that was distinct from
We just
that
give
of
it to them
others.
to spend. at
Give it to
what?
them to
This isn't a
spend.
gotcha, you're just educating me, ma'am.
We give it to them to spend, to support their dignity, to support their specific needs. We are processing them for more durable solutions elsewhere, and we're very grateful to the government of Guatemala for its support for these political prisoners, people who have fled unthinkable persecution. And they told us, these political prisoners told us that cash and voucher assistance, $180 each, it's not much money.
Right.
They
Well,
told us it was a gift from heaven.
is it, what if it's used on something that isn't approved? Is there any way to track that? Is there,
The cash and voucher assistance is given with clear stipulations about what it can be used for, whether it's food or medicine. It's also given with stipulations about where it can be used.
but there's no way to stop it, say they were gonna go, you know?
In fact, there are ways to stop it. We do very robust post-distribution monitoring of this
If the
assistance.
money's already, say they do buy something illegal, go to a liquor store or whatever, buy them a bottle, they drink the bottle, there's no way to get that back.
When we find that there have been any violations of the terms under which they received it, we cut it off.
Okay. How do we know that this money, and how do we ensure that it's not going to Mexican cartels?
We do very robust post-distribution monitoring. We talk with the people who received the money. We talk with the businesses where they're using the funding, to the landlords that they're paying rent to. We check up on how that funding is being used. And again, if there's ever any indication that this money is flowing to criminal organizations, further victimizing people who are already persecuted, we cut it off and take steps. And if criminal investigations are needed, we cooperate with authorities on how to follow up on those.
Right. You use the term robust more than once, but I still worry that if this money is already expended, you can't pull it back. Do you ever worry that giving people money, the State Department is paying some of these people to enter our country illegally? Or even worse, that you're paying the cartels to engage in human trafficking?
We give them the money so they can stay where they are safely, and until we can help them find other solutions like integration in the countries where they are. 94% of migrants in our hemisphere who have left their country remain in other countries of our hemisphere. They're not coming to the United States. And absolutely, we are always concerned about protecting people from criminal organizations. And that's why all of us sitting at this table, together with our colleagues in the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Bureau, our colleagues at USAID, we all work very hard together, coordinate regularly to try and prevent those kinds of abuses.
Thank you. I will yield the remainder 12 seconds back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you all for your testimony.
Are those quite often done in cash or prepaid visas? What's used more?
It really varies on the context. In Poland, for example, where it provides cash and voucher assistance for Ukrainian women who were fleeing with small children, they would get bank accounts set up with funding for them. In Cote d'Ivoire, where I was a couple weeks ago, we actually gave out cash because there are no ATM cards or machines. There are no places where they can use cash cards. It really varies on the context.
How many countries do you give out cash and vouchers?
I would have to check on that. We can get back to you.
Roughly. Give me an estimate.
It is a best practice internationally, so I would say that it's probably at least in the dozens.
At least in the dozens. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. We are, the ranking member and myself have discussed, we're essentially going to wrap up now. He was kind enough to say I could have essentially another round just to give Ms. Dyer a little bit of time here because you haven't had, unfortunately, a great deal of time. But would love to hear you just expound a little bit upon some of the grants and programs that you've been working on and your oversight of them as well. And thank you for your patience here.
Thank you for having me. I think there's two that I would love the opportunity to sort of flag for you. One of them is our Child Protection Compacts. This is one of our most impactful and innovative grant programs, and I'm mentioning it because it is so impactful that we have actually replicated it into a new program. So our Child Protection Compact program is a partnership with another government, and that government has to have skin in the game. They have to give either personnel or staff or building. So it's an actual partnership between the U.S. government and that other government. We have successfully created, for example, in the Philippines, a Philippines Internet Crimes Against Children Center. These are things that are super sustainable and that last long after our government money has ended. In Ghana, we created a shelter for child victims, and this program successfully removed numerous victims of child sexual exploitation and child forced labor. And in Jamaica, which is another example, we successfully created a national referral mechanism and child-friendly spaces. These are so important because these are 3 examples of child protection compacts that have ended, but the good work, thanks to work from Congress and money from Congress, continues to still benefit the community even after we have gone. So that's one of the options that I would love to just sort of highlight. Thank you for your partnership on. It was launched in 2015 and it's congressionally mandated, and it's one that we continue to operate, and we just signed our newest Child Protection Compact in Romania. So thank you for the opportunity to brag on it.
Anything about how you oversee those grants?
Yes, we engage in what we consider a really robust monitoring and evaluation. It is in fact integral to all of our programs, and it begins with the original application. So the application has to include a results monitoring plan, and that's actually one of the criteria that we use about whether or not we're even going to fund that proposal. We continue then to assign it. We have a monitoring and evaluation team in our office that works directly with those implementers, and we work with them to have common performance indicators, which then we follow up on every single quarter. And it's funny, I was a prior grantee from the Trafficking in Persons Office, and so it is so interesting to be in a position now where I'm overseeing those grants. I knew the careful monitoring and cooperation that I had back in 2000, I hate to date myself, 2012 and 2013, and so it's wonderful to kind of bring it full circle and make sure that we are overseeing these and being really good stewards of the money. And I feel like we've done a really good job. We've even instituted a 2-phase application process, which is something that we don't always have, but it really benefits both us as the grantor as well as the grantee. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you very much, and I think bipartisanly we're working on legislation to make sure that we can improve transparency on these grants, and we look forward to hearing more from you and working with you on making that better across the board, across State Department. In that, I will say I thank each of you for your testimony. I thank all of the members, although it's only Ranking Member Crow and myself at this point, for their questions. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for the witnesses, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. I recognize you for any closing statement that you might have.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for calling this hearing today, and I want to just thank the witnesses again for coming, for being candid, for telling the stories of your departments and divisions and the hard work of the men and women that are under your purview, who do work that is essential for human rights, for promotion of fundamental rights around the world. And, you know, I think it sometimes gets lost that this isn't just charity, right? The American people and the American taxpayer isn't giving this just out of charity, although there is a very real moral reason for us to do this that I support. But this is also fundamental to our national security, right? It actually sets us apart from our adversaries. You know, our adversaries who are trying to rewrite the rules of the road and undermine democracy and fundamental rights, you know, autocrats and you know, strong men around the world, they're afraid of these efforts because they realize that if you all are successful in what you do, you empower people, you protect vulnerable populations, you give a voice to the voiceless, you allow people to have fundamental religious freedom, however they choose to observe that. You help stabilize populations, you combat trafficking of humans. If you are successful in doing what you do, you undermine their efforts to suppress people. And I think this is a really important point for people to understand that you're doing work that's in the interests of the American people, that promotes stability, that promotes security, that promotes economy, and actually ties directly back to Americans' ability to have fruitful, positive, fulfilling, and economically viable lives by making sure that people everywhere are safe and secure as well. So I thank you for those efforts, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Crow. I appreciate your testimonies today, and would just follow up by saying, tell us the truth. Tell us the truth promptly about what's taking place. It's not acceptable to stonewall Congress for a month, 12 months, 24 months. It's not acceptable to go out there, and the American people are not stupid or naive. Things are not always more than meets the eye. Sometimes it's very clear what something means. When State Department writes to an implementing partner to neutralize language, but don't neutralize the program activities, the American people aren't stupid. They can read that. They can read it directly at this point, because it is absolutely public information at this point, and see, hey, they don't want us to know something. They don't want us to see exactly what's going on. And they are the ones that pay all of our salaries. They're the ones that pay every dollar that you might spread abroad, whether it's to expand atheism in Nepal, or whether it's to give somebody $180 to buy underwear or something else, whether it's a prepaid debit card or whether it's cash, whether it's somebody printing out a pamphlet telling them how to circumvent U.S. immigration law. All those dollars are coming from the American taxpayer. And our number one responsibility as members of the People's House, the House of Representatives, is to make sure that the people of the United States of America are not the voiceless ones. What we have from the American people is not charity in any way whatsoever, not in any single sense of the word. We should be able to ensure that if any dollar is spent, we can tell the American people, number one, what do the American people need from those that are getting something from us? What do those people, what are they asking for from us? Because as the old saying goes, let's not give them chicken if they're asking for pizza. And does what we are providing get America what it needs out of that relationship? Those questions have to be asked constantly, and we are going to continue to ask those questions as a committee. Again, I appreciate your testimonies, and we look forward to seeing you all another day. This committee is adjourned.
Glasses here.